So we're back working on this 2009 Hyundai Sonata. It has the little four-cylinder engine in it, and it has a jump timing chain, as you can see. Timing chain is very slack. It's actually jumped on the exhaust from what I can tell. And it was towed in as a cranks no start last week, and I've ordered timing chain and sprockets and a kit, tensioner. So we're going to go ahead and start replacing that stuff. First and foremost, I have already got the valve cover off because I had to statically confirm the timing marks. I couldn't find a cam crank correlation waveform on any information site that would help me pinpoint for sure that the timing was off, so I pulled the valve cover off to confirm it, and sure enough, this is what I found. In fact, if I play with this, I can actually get the exhaust cam to jump another tooth. Almost do it right now. Well, so I'll take little short video clips along the way at strategic points. I know we have to support the engine somehow because this front motor mount has to come off, and the supper time belt, obviously. We'll put the power steering pump back corner here out of the way to get some more access to this timing cover, and I think the oil pan has to come off too for whatever reason, but we'll find out. So remove the bolts that hold the plastic belly pan underneath here. There's got about a dozen or so. Remove the right front tire, obviously, and we have to remove this shield to gain access to this side. Now it does say that you have to remove the engine oil pan, which entails removal of the AC compressor off the engine because this bracket is between the two, or at least loosening it anyways. That pan's a bit rusty, but I wonder if we can't do it without leaving the oil pan on there, unless there's a clearance problem, unless the oil pump pickup, but it doesn't mention anything about that. We'll see. So I've got the serpentine belt off. It's still around one of the pulleys up there. I see this pulley has to come off because it's in the way. I don't know what that is, if that's a water pump or an idler, but it doesn't look like it's going to come off of there. There's not much clearance between the front of the engine and the, because there's bolts behind it, obviously. Looks like we're going to have to remove this idler. This thing needs a new serpentine belt. The tensioner's got to come off. The AC compressor we're going to have to move off to the side. I'm just draining the oil because I might as well remove the oil pan. It looks like the job can't be done without moving the oil pan out of the way. So I got a universal engine fixture holding the engine up. I was going to pick it up off of this rib in here, but I was afraid it might break, so I put a small chain, a couple 6mm bolts into the top of the head. Take the front motor mount off. You can weasel the engine mount out of here from underneath here. It's a bit of a challenge. If you lift the power steering reservoir out of the way and remove the overflow bottle, that gives us a little bit more room. I think we're going to remove the AC compressor, not the AC compressor, the power steering pump, and lean it back in the back of the engine bay here just to get more access. Take this front engine mount off as well. So we've removed the power steering pump. There's 3 fasteners, 1 long bolt, 2 short bolts, 12mm heads. Disconnect the reservoir hose and cap it. Hook the power steering pump out of the way back there. And next we're going to remove this idler wheel, this front engine mount, and the tensioner and the other idler down below it. That pulley on the back that I took off already with the 3 little 6mm bolts, that's actually the water pump pulley, and it doesn't look like it comes out of there, but we don't need to take it out because we just need to move it out of the way to gain access to the timing cover bolts. So that engine mount brace that bolts to the front of the engine has 2 long bolts, 1 short bolt, and 1 8mm bolt. So keep them all in order, don't mix them up. And we're going to take the tensioner off, but I think we got to get at it from on the bottom, and that idler pulley off. We're starting to get some room in here. Then we're going to line up at least the intake camshaft. The intake camshaft I think is timed correctly, but we'll see. So when removing this tensioner, take note that it's left-hand thread, so you have to turn it the opposite direction to loosen it. And don't mix up that bolt because you're going to need that. You have to take the pulley off, the wheel off, to get the tensioner out of the way, because there's a bolt underneath there and there's a bolt on the timing cover. So this tensioner has to be removed, but you got to take the pulley off to get the bolt out. So that mount has to come off because there's a couple of bolts that go in the timing cover that are behind it, even if you're going to try to leave the oil pan on, which I'm going to try initially. So you have to loosen off the two bolts on the AC compressor to take the mount off. Here it is here. And the tensioner came off as an assembly. There's a tensioner. And we're ready to start taking the timing cover bolts out now. So I ended up removing the oil pan because it's glued with that RTV sealant pretty good, and I couldn't pry it off, and I didn't want to crack or bend the timing cover. Once the oil pan is off, then you can go up here with a pinch bar and pry out. We got to change this little chain as well, the oil pump drive chain as well, so might as well take the oil pan off. Gives us an opportunity to clean it. There's two 12mm 12-point heads bolts that go up here in the oil pan. For whatever reason, they seem to be about 4 inches long. So let's get the timing cover off from the top now. Well, there's the timing cover off. You have to raise the engine up about 1 inch and then bring it forward towards the right headlight and out through here. So it's going to be fun now to remove the tensioner and stuff. As I said, the timing mark here lines up with the split in the cylinder head, and this one's lined up, but I can't even see the timing mark on the exhaust one. So this oil pump drive, and I'm sure this is a balance shaft too, appears to have a timing mark on it. So there's got to be a timing procedure for this too, because it's also balancing the engine, so it's got to be synced with the crankshaft. I remember one time somebody did one and didn't realize that. This tensioner is just about completely we've got a new one of these chains and these new guides and the oil pressure tensioner for the oil pump or balance shaft as well. So that's enough for the night. We're going to pick up tomorrow. So I run into a bit of a snafu here. This particular vehicle has a two-piece lower gear. So the oil pump drive gear, which goes in first, and the camshaft drive gear are two separate parts. Yet on the timing chain kit that I got, which is a top line brand, and that's the part number 21L, this is a one-piece gear. It's also bigger, and the oil pump chain is shorter than the one that I have. So got the correct one coming. Hopefully it's going to be here in a few minutes. So I've got the timing cover surface all cleaned up, ready for the cover to go back on. The intake camshaft mark is right there, lined up with the head surface. The exhaust camshaft mark is right there, lined up with head surface. I've got this holding fixture here because there's a little bit of tension on this one. It wants to retard slightly. And of course the crank sprocket is lined up with the keyway with the mating surface right there. Now you got to watch this gear. I noticed that it's offset. There's two different edges on here. Focus. So you got to put the shallow end against the block so that the timing mark is out so you can see it. So this appears to be the correct kit. Difference is there's no L. CTKHY-21 as opposed to 21L. So there's the oil pump drive gear, and it actually has a timing mark on it, so the timing mark has to face out. And there's the camshaft drive gear, and it also has a timing mark on it, and that has to face out. Now that timing mark lines up with a colored link on the timing chain, I believe. So we'll get this installed, and we'll get the lower balance shaft oil pump drive chain installed. So I've run into a bit of a snafu here. This balance shaft oil pump assembly has to be timed, and this picture shows the timing marks. The keyway on the crankshaft pointing towards the back of the car, flush with the mating surface on the block. And it shows a picture of colored links. As you see here, a colored link at about 10 o'clock and another colored link at about 8 o'clock. Now when I line those up, my balance shaft isn't in the right spot. There's timing marks on the, see the marked colored link, keyway. See, that's the bottom. No, that's not the bottom, that's the crankshaft pulley. My colored link ends up over here because there's another timing mark on the actual balance shaft assembly right in this area here. You can't see it in this diagram. See, there's a timing mark right here as well. Somewhere in here is a picture of that. But it's upside down. There it is. So you see this timing mark is supposed to line up with that dot. This is upside down, looking at it from the engine on a stand upside down, and this notch lines up with that. So we'll just have a look at the vehicle. Here's what I'm talking about. There's the timing mark right there, and it's lined up, and there's the notch. Let's move this out of the way here. And there's the point. But if I line this mark up, then we're off by about 45 degrees. And I'm sure when I took this apart, with this at TDC, this was way up here. It was like this, in this position. Damn. There's the colored links on the timing chain. So the colored link lines up like that, and this colored link is supposed to line up right there. But if I line that up, if I line this colored link up with this one, then this timing mark is off. Oh brother. So comparing the colored links on the new chain to the old chain and the overall length, they look the same. But yet I can't get all those timing marks to line up. Well, I think I've got it. I had to drop the oil pump assembly because the new chain wasn't stretched far enough to get it over the pulley or the wheel here. So I lined up this colored link with the colored link on the crank and the crank in the right spot. There's the timing mark on the oil pump housing. Now this, according to everything, is supposed to be lined up to that, but it doesn't. And I never took this gear off, so I'm going by this mark. And we're going to see what happens when we turn it a couple of revolutions. Maybe this timing mark doesn't line up after and it ends up over here. Regardless, that's the oil pump drive tensioner installed. Next, timing chain. Well, that was fun. So, with the timing mark here, parallel to the mating surface of the cylinder head, the top of the cylinder head on both sides, you can see both of them there. The colored link lined up with that dot. The colored link lined up with that dot. And down at the crankshaft, the colored link lined up with that dot. Install the chain guides and then pull the tensioner pin like so. Now we're going to put a a bolt in here and turn it a couple of revolutions. Oh, and by the way, this keyway has to be lined up with the connecting rod or the main bearing cap surface, the bottom of the block. So we're going to turn the engine a couple of revolutions and make sure the marks line up. So we turned the engine a couple revolutions, lined up the keyway on the bottom, and the timing marks are lined up here with this surface on the cylinder head top. A lot more tension on the chain now than there was before. It was flopping around. So these bolts that hold the guides on and the tensioners on are 7 to 8 foot-pounds, and we're going to wipe down the surface of the timing cover here now that I've got this ready to go back on. Put some RTV sealant on it, super gray stuff, and put the timing cover back on. Now this is a challenge to put a bead of sealant on here without smearing it, and then sliding the timing cover in without smearing it, but we'll get it done. Install the new timing cover seal in the timing cover, and we're going to clean this gasket surface off with brake cleans to make sure there's no oily residue on it. So as I said, I dropped the oil pump to get the oil pump drive chain on because it wouldn't quite reach over top of the pulley or the gear here. So these 4 bolts that hold it on are 12 foot-pounds, and then 60 degrees, 60 degrees, 60 degrees, 60 degrees, and then turn them another 60 degrees, 60 degrees, 60 degrees, 60 degrees. And we've wiped off the front surface here. We're ready to put a bead of RTV on there. Got to take that pulley bolt out of there. So there's the front cover back together. All the 6mm bolts are 6 to 7 foot-pounds, so that's all the 10mm heads. The 12mm heads, which are 8mm bolts, are 13 to 16 foot-pounds if you're going to use a torque wrench. This crank pulley is 130 foot-pounds. Now they have a holding fixture that actually goes in to the flywheel teeth, but I put a bar in here and just held it up against the end of the crankshaft here because I don't have the oil pan on yet. So that worked quite well. Water pump pulley reinstalled, belt tensioner, idler, and wheel reinstalled. Remember, the belt tensioner and bolt pulley is left-hand thread. So we're ready to clean up the oil pan and reseal that, and put the new spark plugs in it, put the valve cover on. So there's the oil pan installed. Get a little bit of paint on it, try to slow down the rusting process. Serpentine belt is on. Give it a chance for this oil pan silicone to cure. Put fresh oil in it and fire it up. Well, here goes moment of truth. We're going to see if it starts. Contact. Well, that's a little better than not running. Doesn't appear to have any misfires. Going to have a look at the known good cam crank waveform. So analyzing these waveforms after the fact, here's the original cranking waveform when it wouldn't start. I couldn't find a known good pattern to compare this to, but here you can see the crank signal with it's 60 teeth minus 2, so that's roughly 6 degrees for every tooth. And the green trace here is the intake camshaft, and you notice the signal drops about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 before this notch on the crank. We compare that to what we have now. That's the same. So I was right. The intake cam was properly timed, but the exhaust cam, let's look at the exhaust cam on the cranking waveform when it wouldn't start. Notice that it rises about, I'll put the cursor there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 36 degrees after the notch on the crank.
and then compare it to the known good waveform now that it's running. This was taken cranking the same way I disabled the injectors. And you can see that it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, roughly 15 times 6. So 15 times 6 for 6 times 6 is 36, so that's like 72 degrees. So it was off by about 36 degrees, and it was advanced. I'm sorry, retarded, because it was no, I'm sorry, it was advanced. That's right, because this is the correct waveform now, and this is the bad waveform. So this one was opening, or the camshaft was advanced. Well, regardless, it's running good now, no codes. It's all good. Thanks for watching.